Good evening, everybody. How are we doing today? We'll turn that off. Let's put me down here and put Otangelo up there next to JL Warren. Good evening, everyone. How are we doing? It is good to see everybody here. We have the one and only Otangelo here, along with JL Warren. We're going to have a civil debate on atheism versus theism. I hope everybody's going to have a good time and maybe possibly learn a little bit. Thank you to both of the interlocutors for showing up today. If you want to give yourselves a brief introduction, go right ahead. Otangelo, seeing as how you're the guest, we'll start with you.
Yes, hello guys, good evening. Hello JL, hello Johnny. Well, I think you guys know me, but for who doesn't know me, I'm an evangelical Christian. I'm a younger creationist, and I have two channels on YouTube. One is Intelligent Design Academy, the other is The God Talk. I have a virtual library. The name is reasonandscience.catsport.com, where I join information which reflects my thinking, my worldview, what I believe.
Awesome. Thank you for that. JL?
I'm JL, and I have a channel here on YouTube where I engage theists and talk about theist claims and debunk woo belief and various stuff like that. I also run a horror film podcast called Week in Horror. I think the vast majority of the people in the audience are familiar with it. And of course, you have all my links. You guys know where to find them. So thank you, Johnny, for hosting.
Absolutely. All right. So the way we are going to work this is the usual. Really quick, let me get to this. Rob Parks for 5 says, probably won't make it through the entire thing, but here is my ties to the Church of Johnny. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. All right. So we have agreed to a moderated debate. We'll take turns. There's not going to be a whole lot of over talking. There will be a back and forth in between. There will be a back and forth after the 3 points and the counterpoints are made. We'll have a little bit to give you guys some room to have a discussion. And yes, I will make sure that everyone has their opportunity to get their points across and have their say. That being said, have we decided who wants to go first?
I'm open. So do you want to coin flip it, or what do you want to do?
I tell you what, Otangelo, again, since you're the guest, we'll give you the option. You can either begin with your opening statements, or you can defer to JL. It's up to you.
Yeah, I can start. For me, it's fine.
All right. Give me just a second to get the timer ready, and then we'll put you full screen. Boom. And I'll mute JL. And whenever you're ready, you may begin.
Yeah, I would like that you share the screen. As soon as I can start, tell me, please.
Yeah, whenever you're ready, you go right ahead.
Can I start? Have you shared the screen?
Yeah, the screen is being shared right now.
Okay. Okay, so this is my introduction to our debate today. J.L. Warren published a video on his YouTube channel, Top 10 Arguments Against the Existence of God. One claim is, virtually all processes and phenomena in the universe can be explained now. There are a few gaps in our knowledge, but we have taught men working on them. To that assertion, let me quote physics professor Ulrich Becker. He stated when commenting on the existence of God, "How can I exist without a creator? I am not aware of any compelling answer ever given." So J.L. Warren goes on and claims, there is no evidence that even implies that the laws of the universe, that which describes how the universe operates, is contingent upon anything. There is no necessity for a God at any point in the current predictive model. So my answer to that is gobbledygook. What I will present in this introduction will disprove his claim, and I will present some powerful arguments for the necessity of a creator which finely tuned the universe to permit life. Fred Hoyle stated, a common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a superintellect has monkeyed with physics. Some argue that fine-tuning is not real. However, no competent scientist denies that If the laws of nature and constants were just a little bit different in our universe, carbon-based life would never have emerged. The laws of physics and constants, the initial conditions of the universe, the expansion rate of the Big Bang, atoms and the subatomic particles, the fundamental forces of the universe, stars, galaxies, the solar system, the Earth, the Moon, the atmosphere, water, and even biochemistry on a molecular level, and the bonding forces of molecules like Watson-Crick base pairing are finely tuned in an extremely narrow range to permit life. In 2008, Hugh Gross mentioned 140 features of the cosmos, including the laws of physics and over 1,300 fine-tuned parameters of a planetary system and its galaxy that must fall within extremely narrow ranges to allow for the possibility of advanced life existence. Since then, that number has doubled. Roger Penrose estimated that the odds of the initial low entropy state of our universe occurring by chance are 1 in 10,123rd power. The incredibly low entropy state of the initial conditions had to be finely tuned and was required to avoid excessive black holes. The second law of thermodynamics arises because there was an enormous constraint of a very particular kind placed on the universe at the beginning of time, giving us the very low entropy that we need in order to start the universe. Why did it not begin in a high entropy, highly disordered state? Why did it start off in such a special, improbable low entropy state? To put that in perspective, the distance to the edge of the observable universe is about 46 billion light years in any direction. That means there would be roughly 10 to the 102nd power of atoms if we filled the entire volume of the universe with atoms without leaving any space. An atom is 99.999% of empty space. If we would fill its entire space with protons, there would be 2.5 to the 13th power of protons filling it. The odds to find one red proton in 100 universes the size of ours filled with protons is about the same as to get a universe with a low entropy state at the beginning like ours. If we had to find our universe amongst an ensemble of almost infinite parallel universes, it would take 17 billion years to find one which would be eventually ours. Price, a philosopher of science at Cambridge, has called the low entropy condition of the early universe the most underrated discovery in the history of physics. But having a low entropy state is not the only parameter to kickstart the expansion of the universe. In the paper, Do We Live in the Best of All Possible Worlds? The Fine-Tuning of the Constants of Nature states, the evolution of the universe is characterized by a delicate balance of its inventory, a balance between attraction and repulsion. It mentions 4 parameters that must be finely tuned. The physical factors are themselves independent of each other, and each must be finely tuned to the extreme. Together, the odds to have the right expansion rate is in the order above 10 to the 400th power. That is picking one red atom amongst 4 entire universes the size of ours filled with atoms. But that will not guarantee us a universe later filled with life. For that, we need atoms and the periodic table with heavy elements. At the earliest stage of the universe, immediately after the Big Bang, no matter existed in the universe. It had only energy and the superforce, a combination of 4 natural forces. That's the gravity, the strong nuclear, weak nuclear, and electromagnetic force. Fast forward a nanosecond or 2, and in the beginning, there was a cosmic soup of elementary stuff, electrons and quarks and other particles. There had to have been a mechanism to produce the various particles that make up matter and stuff. all the elements that make up galaxies, stars, and planets, and us instead of just one thing. There could have been a cosmos where the sum total of mass was pure neutrinos and all of the energy was purely kinetic. Right at the beginning of the Big Bang, things were very hot and had to cool down enough for the quarks, the subatomic particles, to bind together and form electrons, neutrons, and protons. Fine-tuning is necessary to form atoms, and all of these bits and pieces have to mesh like a clock or even a watch. One can't just assemble these bits and pieces in just any way and expect things to work out. These processes are governed by the laws, principles, and relationships of quantum mechanics, all of which had to come from somewhere or from something. Protons and neutrons are made up from more fundamental particles called quarks. Without the right configuration of these quarks, there would be no atoms and no life. They are held together by the strong nuclear force. Electrons are held in their orbit by the electromagnetic force. And gravity is the large-scale attractive force which holds people on planets, stars, and galaxies together. The fundamental forces have to be in the right relationship to permit our universe to be filled with atoms. The strong force is approximately 137 times as strong as electromagnetism, 10 million times as strong as the weak interaction, and 10 to the 38 power times stronger than gravity. Another very impressive fine-tuning occurs at the level of chemistry. All of chemistry is essentially defined by only two parameters. One is the electromagnetic force constant, also called fine structure constant. Its value forms a deep mystery. 137 is the number that defines how stars burn, how chemistry happens, and even if atoms exist at all. It is that electromagnetic force that holds electrons in their orbit, and increase it too much, and protons repel each other so strongly that small atomic nuclei can't hold together. Go a bit further, and nuclear fusion factories within stars grind to a halt and can no longer produce carbon, the element of which life is based. The two fundamental forces of gravity and electromagnetism need to be balanced on a razor's edge, and the radiation of the sun has to be finely tuned to permit life on Earth. It was this number that made Feynman making following statement. There is a most profound and beautiful question associated with the observed coupling constant. It is a simple number, about 137. It has been a mystery ever since, and all good theoretical physicists put this number up on their wall and worries about it. Immediately, you would like to know where this number for a coupling comes from. It's one of the greatest damn mysteries of physics. A magic number that comes to us with no understanding by man. You might say the hand of God wrote that number, and we don't know how he pushed the pencil.
All right, Otangelo, that is your 10 minutes.
Yeah, give me a few seconds and I'm finishing.
Just a few seconds to wrap up.
Yeah. We know what kind of a dance to do experimentally to measure this number very accurately, but we don't know what kind of dance to do on the computer to make this number come out without putting it secretly in it. Good argued that numerological explanation would only be acceptable if it could be based on a good theory that is not yet known but exists in the sense of Platonic idealism. So science has no predictive model for our life-permitting universe. To me, looking and learning about our awe-inspiring universe is prime evidence of God's existence, power, and glory.
All right, JL, you are up. Let me boom. Both debaters do keep an eye on the private chat. That's where I will let you know where you have 60, 30, 20, 10 seconds left. JL, when you are ready, you may begin.
All right. Well, thank you, Johnny O, for hosting this debate, and thank you to my opponent, Otangelo, for being here. My name is J.L. Warren, and I am an atheist. I run a YouTube channel that focuses on bringing critical thinking and rationality to the theist-atheist discussion with an aim to combat irrational thinking and the irrational behavior that it breeds and bridge the societal divides that dogmatic thinking often creates. And while it has always been my position that people have the right to believe whatever they want, I, however, draw the line at people thinking that their beliefs give them license to interfere in others' lives, especially to detrimental effect. So given that this debate is atheism versus theism and not a physics debate, and as such a title, atheism versus theism, is very broad, I figured I would start by ensuring that certain terms are clearly defined and then go the route of explaining how atheism is logically valid and coherent by looking at how the arguments of my opponent are nothing more than appeals to emotion, arguments from incredulity, quote mining, and begging the question, especially when those quotes are out of context as well. First and foremost, my opponent will argue that atheism is a propositional statement of the non-existence of God. What he will forget is that the term atheism is in fact polysemous. Atheism here, as I will argue on the grounds of scholarly utility, is the psychological state of not believing or accepting any God propositions. The logical grounding for this being a lack of demonstrable evidence beyond the scope of personal conjecture, logical inconsistencies, and viciously circular argumentation. Atheism makes no propositional claim, it merely rejects the theist proposition. Secondly, the term fact. As defined by every source that I could locate, a fact is a descriptor of reality, full stop. There is no need to reference any ultimate or absolute for a fact to accurately describe reality. And it must be remembered that a fact is only true because it is true now and not because it was true in the past or it might be true in the future. And it is strictly through empiricism, through testing, that we can establish the truth of a fact. So the 3 points that I will address tonight are: 1, the fallacy of the teleological fine-tuning argument and the unfounded assumptions it makes as to the nature of life and the universe. 2, how the Christian triune God, as my opponent defines it, would result in direct violations of the fundamental laws of reality. And 3, how logic and evidence aid in the composing of better pathways to truth than faith and presuppositions. Now, my opponent will likely attempt to keep the conversation mired in metaphysics, challenging the very nature of what reality is, of what truth is, of how we as a species cannot actually know anything unless we are omniscient ourselves. He will commit the inductive fallacy of claiming that atheists presuppose the uniformity of nature to give science its credibility. That is because my opponent will continually swim in the shallow, abstract waters of metaphysics whilst completely disregarding the deep end of epistemology, the investigation of what distinguishes justified belief from opinion. Ultimately, it is important to recognize that while metaphysics is important in guiding our exploration of the natural world, to quote Dr. Massimo Pagliucci, metaphysics without epistemology is pointless because epistemology grounds us. We must recognize that evidence, the available body of facts or information indicating whether a belief or proposition is true or valid, cannot be dismissed. We must recognize that we cannot change definitions of specific terms to suit our personal agendas if we hope to have a coherent conversation. My opponent must recognize that appealing to foundational 13th century thinking will not serve us here in the progressed 21st century, that what is true is more important than what we want to be true, lest our conversations be drowned in intellectual dishonesty and tribalistic beliefs. Only then can we as a species cast off the shackles of superstition, existential fear, and magical thinking, declare our own purpose, and stride into a future of bold determination and wildly curious exploration. Thank you.
It's this button that I have to push. All right. So now we have. Let me cancel that. We're going to let Otangelo present your 3 points of your 3 main points in your argumentation. Otangelo, you have 10 minutes when you are ready. Do you need to share screen, Otangelo?
No.
Okay. Whenever you are ready, you may begin.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be ready. Okay. I will first make a syllogism to substantiate my introduction, and then I will reply to the points made by J.R. Warren. 1, the laws of physics and constants, the initial conditions of the universe, the expansion rate of the Big Bang atoms and the subatomic particles, the fundamental forces of the universe, stars, galaxies, the solar system, the Earth, the Moon, the atmosphere, water, and even biochemistry on a molecular level, and the bonding forces of molecules like Watson-Crick-based pairing are finely tuned in an unimaginably narrow range to permit life. In 2008, Hugh Gross mentioned 140 features of the cosmos as a whole, including the laws of physics, and over 1,300 quantifiable characteristics of a planetary system and its galaxy that must fall within extremely narrow ranges to allow for the possibility of advanced life's existence. Since then, that number has doubled. 2. Penrose estimated that the odds of the initial low entropy state of the universe occurring by chance alone are in the order of 1 to 10 to the 10,123rd power. Ross calculated that less than one chance in 1 to 10 to the 1032nd power exists that even one life-supporting planet would occur anywhere in the universe without invoking divine miracles. There is an estimation of about 10 to the 80th power of atoms in the universe. 3. Of course, if there is a physical necessity that does not permit a non-life permitting universe, in other words, if the state of affairs is that the universe could not other than have exactly these parameters to permit life, then any statistical probability calculations are meaningless. If the state of affairs, however, can change, then this fact demands a very good explanation. 4. There are infinite possible ways that the various fundamental constants of the standard models could have been chosen. In fact, Paul Davies states, there is not a shred of evidence that the universe is logically necessary. Indeed, as a theoretical physicist, I find it rather easy to imagine alternative universes that are logically consistent and therefore equal contenders of reality. 5. The laws of physics, constants, and the fine-tuned parameters can change. Not all laws of nature can become scientific laws because many will not create a scientist. A randomly chosen universe is extraordinarily unlikely to have the right conditions for life, but likely on theism, since a powerful, extraordinarily intelligent designer has the ability of foresight and knowledge of what parameters, laws of physics, and fine-tuned conditions would permit a life-permitting universe. The existence of our universe and us is very improbable on naturalism and very likely on theism. 6. And therefore, the fact that they are set up to instantiate a life-permitting universe is best explained by a lawgiver and fine-tuner, which is God. Now, in regards to what J.L. Warren said in his introduction, atheism is logically valid. Well, first of all, in order for you to say that, you need to presuppose a logic, and you have to explain how logic could have emerged by natural mechanisms, that is, by physical mechanisms. But as a dualist, I believe that the mind and physics are two different substances. So I don't think that hard objects can instantiate a mind and also a brain. And even if you put a neuron and then 100 billion neurons, claiming that one neuron cannot form intelligence, but 100 billion neurons could do, that is a logical fallacy of composition. So I don't think that atheists and atheism and naturalism cannot ground the existence of logic whatsoever. Then, since the quest is about atheism, atheism does not entail only the position of weak atheism, which means that simply rejecting the claim that God exists, but as well strong atheism, which is the claim that most likely no God exists. So I expect that J.L. Warren is able actually to substantiate that claim, providing positive good reasons why he believes that naturalism tops theism in explanatory power to explain our existence on all relevant issues in regards of origins, that is, regards of the origin of the universe, the laws of physics, fine-tuning, origin of life, biodiversity, consciousness, and morality. I don't think that we have to put facts on the table because we do not have the possibility to see and perceive what exists beyond the physical universe. So I am not holding to a pre-sup approach, but abduction to the best explanation, where we put both sides on the table, weight one against each other, and then see which proposition, theism or atheism, has the better explanatory power. I don't think that the teleological argument is a fallacy, quite in the contrary. I think it is one of the most powerful approaches to substantiate theism. And I have just demonstrated that just with the fine-tuning argument. I mean, what naturalists or atheists can do, they can resort to a multiverse where there is absolutely no prediction that can be made by science in regards of that, and absolutely no evidence whatsoever. It is just an attempt to eradicate and to eliminate the God proposition from the equation. But even then, if that would be true, then that multiverse would have also to require an explanation, because it would have to require a multiverse generator, which also would have to be finely tuned, and it would have a beginning, and then we would still be with the question what generated and caused that multiverse generator and then multiverses. I don't think that we hold just to opinion or to blind belief, but my belief that theism is true is based on a reasonable faith and reasonable belief based on scientific, theologic, and theistic arguments. I agree with that metaphysics without epistemology is pointless, and I think in order to have a good conversation, both sides need to have a good epistemological framework, which is not based on simplistic challenges like prove me that God exists. Rather, we should provide a good foundation which is based on theology, philosophy, and science, and then use good methodology like abductive reasoning to the best explanation to have good inferences and good conclusions. I think that Aquinas' 5 ways is a very powerful argument, which actually is even a proof in regards of God's existence, and I hold to the belief that God is necessary. And I agree that what is true is more important to what we want to be true. So I try in my approach as much as possible to eliminate bias and to have an honest consideration of the evidence, and then come to true conclusions which most likely mirror reality and what the real situation was in regards of origins. I don't think that calling theistic belief superstition or magical thinking. Of course, if we would remove a creator from the equation, then there would be basically no mechanism left to instantiate the origin of the universe. And so that would be a worse proposition to say than to say that there was an eternal necessary creator which instantiated the physical universe by mechanisms which we don't fully understand, but which are not logically implausible. And I believe that God used his power and his intelligence to instantiate the physical universe. So this is addressing J.L. Warren's initial statements.
All right. J.L. Warren, you have 5 minutes to rebut.
Okay,
well, you may begin when you are ready.
Okay, thank you. Where to kind of begin with that? Well, you started off, Otangelo, saying that you were going to bring up a syllogism. I didn't hear a syllogism, but that's okay. It was kind of like it was a little difficult to follow. So I'm going to try to do my best to kind of touch on the things within these 5 minutes. So there were a lot of assumptions in there. First, I have to disagree with the quote mining you do from Hoyle and Penrose, because Hoyle and Penrose are both atheists, and I'm vaguely familiar because I'm not a physicist, and this was not a physics debate, because if physics was going to prove God, it would have done it already, but it does not. So otherwise, physicists would all be theists, but they're not. Virtually, I think none of them are. Virtually none of them are. So I don't want to speak to all of them. But Hoyle and Penrose were atheists, and I'm pretty sure you took those quotes out of context. They were talking about other things, not proof for God. You also assume, you make the big assumption, the biggest failing with the fine-tuning argument is you assume that, one, this is the only universe, and 2, that this is the only way the universe could be, that life could be in it, just because we have a sample size of 1. And we don't really have well-defined probability distribution functions when it comes to determining what the odds would be of a particular universe, especially in the many worlds theory. There could be all manner of worlds. Okay, so this could just be the one. In fact, it most likely is an atypical universe because this is the one that supports human life. And probably the vast majority of all other possible universes would not support human life because we can only observe the one that we're currently in, that we're kind of like, we're made by as a natural process. So there's issues there. A big issue there is logic. Logic is not created. Logic is descriptive of the universe, and the negation of logic, the negation reaffirms it. So logic is affirmed by its negation. If you don't utilize logic, so when we go to make distinctions between things, like a thing exists or a thing does not exist, we invoke the laws of logic as to describe the distinction between them. So it's not that something conjured them, it's literally one of mankind's greatest breakthroughs in describing how our universe operates. And that's what we do. This is how we make A equals A is not equal to not A, so on and so forth. Big problem with Aquinas' first move. I won't aim at the attack all 5, but the very first one is the first way, the first cause, or because he bases it out of motion. The universe is motion. There must be something that moved it. So the unmoved mover. The problem is it's viciously circular because Aquinas special plead God out of his first premise. So the whole argument becomes viciously circular. And it just continues on down the line with 2, 3, 4, and 5. Ultimately, and you said it yourself, you don't really want to focus on facts, which is intellectually dishonest because facts are what we have. They're descriptors of reality, and we can test them to demonstrate their truth. And intellectual honesty is what it's all about, because you stated there right there towards the end that there is no evidence for this. So because without presupposing God or sticking God into the variable of what came before the Big Bang or became before the Planck epoch, there's no answer. And you are correct. There is no answer. It is a big question mark, but it's intellectually dishonest to stick an answer in there when there's no evidence to support it, especially when the evidence you've given is completely misconstrued or misquoted or taken out of context. So when it comes down to it, the laws of physics are the laws of physics. They're descriptive of reality. They don't say that there is a God. And if it did, then all physicists would be God. So I think we have a couple of PhDs in the audience right now who would disagree with that statement. I, however, am not a PhD, so I'd like to keep this topic on theism and atheism. And the fact that you've constantly said multiple times that atheism is illogical and irrational, when in fact you just demonstrated yourself it's the most intellectually honest position because we don't assume to know what we can't possibly know. Thank you.
All right, Mr. J.L. Warren. Now, if you would give me 1 second to reset this here.
Yep.
If you would like to give your 3-point presentation, you have 10 minutes beginning when you're ready.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, so point number 1, the fine-tuning fallacy. The teleological argument for fine-tuning, or that the isolated system that we call the universe is fine-tuned for us, or for life that looks like us, concluded by virtue that life has been found nowhere else thus far in the universe. It's bankrupt for a number of reasons, predominantly for the number of presuppositions about the nature of life it makes and the emotional appeal that life has any inherent or objective meaning or value. This argument only persists when the individual giving it lacks a fundamental understanding of the universe itself and how we observe it operating. Now, certainly, with slight changes in the observed fundamental properties of the universe, life as we observe here on Earth would not exist. Key phrase, as we observe it. But this assumes that life could not arise in some other form, or that all undiscovered regions of the universe are exactly like they are here. The problem is, if you change one fundamental aspect of the universe, everything else changes along with it, and it simply alters the playing field, and life could arise in another form. This argument also disregards the observed reality that life is possible only in short cosmic windows. For example, the Earth being demonstrably 4.5 billion years old, and yet complex life only evolved in the last 540 million years during the Phanerozoic era, or eon, sorry. In point of fact, the universe is demonstrably hostile to life as we observe it, as evidenced by the thousands of ways that it would destroy us in a heartbeat without the finite protections of this planet, protections that are steadily declining as our planet's window of survivability slowly closes, an inevitable consequence of our orbital mechanics. So when addressing the fine-tuning argument, it's important to ask a basic question. What is the universe I expect to see under theism? To answer that, we compare it to the entire body of collected data and see if it fits. And what we discover is that the universe we observe fits under naturalism and not under theism. Under theism, life is expected to not just be incredibly important, but in fact the primary focus of all of existence. But this is simply not what we observe or are even justified in expecting. We observe that life, not just human, but all potentiality, is a relatively insignificant natural process in comparison to the cosmos, and any importance attributed to life is merely an appeal to emotion and an argument from incredulity. Point number 2, direct violations of reality. So bear with me, and we'll try and get through this. It must also be stated that given the particular attributes of God, namely the Christian triune God, there are direct and severe implications of such a being having these attributes. While it does not disprove all gods, we can, through direct observation of the universe, conclude that the Christian omniscient being does not exist in this reality. An omniscient being, knowing all current states in all possible worlds, would be a direct violation of the uncertainty relations in quantum mechanics. From the work of Hanji and Wenner at the Center for Quantum Technologies, it is understood that this violation implies a direct violation of the second law of thermodynamics, leading to a thermodynamic cycle with positive network gain, the empirical effects of which are not detected in nature. From this, we can come to 3 conclusions. 1, an omniscient being exists somehow outside of the isolated system and does not interact with it, therefore meeting the qualia of non-existence. 2, an omniscient being exists somewhere, does interact with the system, and deceptively hides the effect of its interactions from discovery, challenging the established nature of said being. Or 3, an omniscient being does not exist anywhere in nature. If my opponent requires that I explain the reasoning and physics on this, we can do so during the open discussion, as I'm sure he'll have many questions. Now, as a side note, it must be pointed out that relativity would not allow an omniscient being to operate within this reality. Space and time are intrinsically linked, and relativity states that there is no absolute reference frame, that these do not exist. Omniscience would imply that such a reference frame does in fact exist, a direct violation of the theory of relativity, arguably the most tested and confirmed theory in all of physics, next to quantum electrodynamics. Were such a being to interact with the universe in any way, it would cease to be omniscient. Point 3, logic over faith. Lastly, all we must do to understand that atheism is both valid and coherent is reference the laws of logic. The law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, and the law of excluded middle are each affirmed by their negation. They are confirmed universally true by modal logic and are fundamental descriptors of the universe we occupy. Concerning the nature of God, one must ask if God conforms to or does not conform to the laws of logic. Essentially, God is either constrained by the laws of logic or not. If God is constrained by the laws of logic, then God cannot operate in a logically contradictory manner. If this is the case, it follows that the God concept is unnecessary, as we can appeal simply to the laws of logic and the universe itself for both metaphysical and empirical ontology. However, if God transcends the laws of logic and such descriptors do not apply to such a being, then God, by the nature of its very being, can both exist and not exist simultaneously, because the laws of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle would not apply to this being. If this is the case, then God is incoherent, uninformative, and we need only appeal to the laws of logic to understand distinctions in reality. And we come to the problem of faith. My opponent has stated in the past that a person can in fact put their faith in the wrong things. If faith can be put in the wrong things, or a person can be deceived into putting faith into the wrong things, then it follows that faith is not a reliable pathway to the truth and should not be referenced in such endeavors due to its heavily subjective nature. Thank you.
All right. 1 second, Otangelo, and let me get you. Boom. All right, Otangelo, you have 5 minutes to rebut whenever you're ready.
Okay. When I use arguments from non-believing scientists like Penrose or Davis, then what I use is actually the evidence which they have investigated and brought forward. Now, around the scientific circle, there is a philosophic circle which is actually the interpretation of the evidence, of the scientific evidence provided. And that is what I use to make actually an argument for God's existence. So I have done with Penrose and with Hoyle and with Davis, using their exploration of what they have investigated and brought to light for all of us to appreciate, and then actually philosophically address what they have provided, and then making an argument for God. We have just one sample size of our universe, that is correct, but nonetheless, science has actually tested and has come to the conclusion, and there is a wide range of physicists which confirm this is an undisputed fact, that the universe is indeed finely tuned to host advanced life on Earth, and that demands an explanation in regards of all these things which work in a joint venture together, starting from the initial conditions of the universe to the Big Bang, to the atoms, which require the right fundamental forces in order to actually form atoms, quarks, and electrons, and so forth. And going to the planet Earth, there are at least 20, but many more constants which have to be just right in order to have life. And the odds to have a life-hosting planet are, as I stated in my initial statement, they are far beyond the number of atoms in the entire universe. So I think looking at this fact, theism, an intelligent creator which intentions to make actually a universe hosting life, is a better explanation rather than natural, unguided, random events which would have to try billions and billions of universes until to find one which would actually not recollapse and then go back to a singularity, but actually expand, become possible to host atoms, and in the end life. But what would be much more probable is actually a universe which would be void of atoms and chemistry and molecules and life whatsoever. It would most probably simply be void. Logic is descriptive of the universe. Logic is affirmed by the negation. Greatest breakthrough to describe the universe. Well, I mean, we agree on that. Logic is necessary in order to actually even have a thought. The question is, where does logic come from? And since I regard logic as something which comes from the mind, and the mind cannot come from physical matter, it is in its core, in its substance, it is different from hard objects and from matter. And therefore, the best explanation is that there is an eternal, non-created, super powerful, super intelligent mind, which created beings as us, which are made upon his image, as Genesis says. And so we mirror God's mind. God is logic, and we can use logic as well. I don't think that Aquinas, that there is any kind of problem with the argument, with the motion and the unmoved mover. The fact is, and we know that in order to have motion, to have energy, you require time, and in order to have that, you need a beginning, and therefore you need a cause, and that cause must be beyond and above the physical natural world, and it must be eternal, timeless, and instantiate the physical world. I don't think it is dishonest to stick to the Kalam, quite to the contrary, and I don't think that the premise entails already the inference. It isn't a circular argument. It starts with the sound first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause, and we know that because something cannot come from nothing. The laws are descriptive of reality, not prescriptive. I disagree. We know that, for example, the physical constants and the forces which hold atoms together, they are constant in the entire universe, but the fact that these forces have precisely the coupling constants and the forces which are required to have atoms that demands an explanation. We cannot take that simply as a given. These forces could be simply different, and then we wouldn't have any atoms and no life.
All right. That was time. It is now time for the back and forth. I have a few questions from the audience as well. So if you guys would like to begin, we might go over a little bit over 30 minutes, but we'll try and get as much in as possible. So I would like to start with one of the questions from the audience. What process or mechanisms, I'm assuming this is for Otangelo, what process or mechanisms did the intelligent designer use to fine-tune all of these parameters?
Intelligent and God's power. Of course, we don't know exactly how he can do that, but as an analogy, for example, I can intend to move my arm, and my mind can give that order to my brain, to the nervous system, to my fingers, and then I can actually move my arm and do something. So there is an interface mind-body which works. We have this experience by ourselves, so I can I see there is no logical contradiction or any problem that we can suppose that God is powerful enough to instantiate the physical world through his power and through his mind.
Oh, hang on a second, JL. My mistake. There we go.
There's a problem with that, though. They're saying that it's God's power has no mechanistic explanation. It doesn't say how God did it. It's simply saying that God did it. It's just a reaffirmation of what you're originally saying. But yeah, there's no evidence to support that God did it. You're simply stating that God did it, and then saying that the potentially long odds of the universe that we're currently living in, even though we have a sample size of 1 and we could never really determine the odds to any specific degree, you're basically just saying it was God because it was God. There's no mechanistic explanation as to how God did it or even why God did it. And even then, anything proposed is either contradictory to God's nature, or it's contradictory to the Bible, or it's logically contradictory to nature itself.
Well, I mean, once you remove God or an intelligent, powerful creator from the equation to explain our physical universe, what is left? Nothing. So you have a
question mark. It's not that there's nothing there. It's just a question mark. It's just an answer. It's currently a question that we can't answer, going beyond a specific time that we can measure, that we can observe. And then it's just inserting God before this. So you're basically asking, what this whole thing boils down to is you're basically asking what came before the Planck epoch, or what kicked the football on the Big Bang, which physicists are obviously constantly asking that question. It's like, but we don't know. There's like a dozen hypotheses, maybe even more, of this universe, of what it could have been. And a nameless, faceless deity sufficiently powerful enough to create everything and then kick the football in the universe and then fucked right off with no evidence of its existence very well could be an explanation. But there's no evidence to support that. There's evidence to support things like the cyclical universe, or where the death of one leads to the beginning of another, and these ones. But no evidence to support this mind outside of a body. And using that you have a brain and an arm you do, that's a false equivalency. You know that.
Okay, I think that either there is a God or there is no God. That is a true dichotomy. If you remove God from the equation, then you have no causal mechanism left. And I think this is a problem which you as an atheist or as a naturalist have to deal with.
It's not a problem. It's not.
Hang on, Dale.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Let me finish.
Mm-hmm.
In regards of your proposal of a cyclical universe, that is, you cannot have an infinite regress, and also the second law of thermodynamics disproves that there could be an eternal universe, because it starts with a low entropy state, which science has no explanation how that state actually occurred, how it happened, and it ends at a high entropy state, but there is no mechanism known how you could go back to a low entropy state. That is an open question. So that would, of course, break the second law of thermodynamics. So I think there are basically 3 good reasons that we should not hold to an eternal universe. And the 2 are philosophical. One is that eternal regress is not possible. The second is the law of thermodynamics. The third is that the Big Bang theory, which states that everything started very hot at the first Planck time. We don't know what was before the singularity, but we have good reasons to believe that it actually started from literally nothing physical.
No, that would actually be a violation of the first law of thermodynamics. That energy or the potential to do work came from nothing. Because even if you say it's God, it still came from nothing because God created the universe out of nothing. He simply willed it into existence. So it literally came from nothing. That's literally your argument. The thing is that physicists don't say that. Physicists don't say it came from nothing. Physicists say that the potential to do work, the energy that was there, it's not like there was like a glowing ball of plasma that was like, the size of a period out there in the middle of nowhere. It's literally the potentiality to do work and energy in all of its forms. And then that expanded. So the question is, what caused the expansion? Was there a quantum event or some sort of singular event that triggered the expansion of this, and that we do not know? And that's okay for us not to know that, okay? Because we can't know it currently, but you asserting that it's God is just an argument from incredulity because you don't know how it is, so therefore it must be God, which is an argument from incredulity, which is what I stated in my intro. And that everything that you're asserting regarding this is simply because we don't know, so therefore God, because we can't think, because you can't think of a better explanation. So it's literally driven by the fact that you want God to be the answer.
First of all, the laws of physics, including the first law of thermodynamics, they were instantiated at the Big Bang. They were not simply floating around in a hyperspace and so on and so forth, and then just waiting for physical things to start to operate and then to start to direct them. So I see that argument very frequently, and that is simply not true. Energy cannot be destroyed or created once that it is instantiated at the Big Bang, and not before. And there was no energy prior to the Big Bang and the physical universe. So the laws of physics,
the Big Bang is.
Hang on a second, AJ. Let him finish, JL.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Let him finish.
The laws of physics and the physical universe, they started both at the singularity at the beginning of the universe. The first law of thermodynamics wasn't simply there before, so that refutes what you just claimed.
No, you're patently incorrect about that. The Big Bang was an event, not the instantiation of anything. It was an event where the isolated system that we observe called the universe and effectively time began. Okay, so no, it's not the instant. No physicist says that the Big Bang was the beginning of anything. It's merely an event, the beginning of what we know as space-time. That's it. So no, you are patently incorrect about that one. There's a number of PhDs in the live chat that will confirm that because, like I said, this isn't a physics debate. If physics was going to prove God, it would have done so already. But virtually no physicists are theists. If anything that you said was true regarding physics, all physicists would be theists, but they are not. So why argue physics? Science is not going to prove God. We can use empiricism to back up our claims about reality, but science is not going to prove God anytime soon. Greater minds than us have had this conversation before, and it's simply not the way it's going to be, especially not tonight. What we do is we look at the facts, we look at reality, we look at what we can test, we look at what we can observe, and we look at the predictive modeling that we have via our current understanding of the isolated system we call the universe. And sorry, God has no explanatory power. You can put that variable, you can put the God into any variable you want, but it doesn't get us anywhere. In fact, it only complicates matters because it doesn't explain anything mechanistically.
All right, I'll tell you what, let's set that one down, and we're going to move on to the next question from the audience. This one is specifically for Otangelo, and I think we can probably wrap this one pretty quick. What reason do you have to think that the probability distribution of the constants of physics have a uniform distribution?
I don't understand the question.
Well, I believe this was in response to your opening statement where you talked about the uniform distribution of physics. I'm not for certain because this was a little bit earlier in the chat.
Well, there is a uniform distribution of matter in the universe. I don't know if that was what it was referenced to.
No, that's actually refuted by the supervoids that we observe in space. So no, there is not a uniform distribution of matter in the universe.
All right, let's get to the next one here. One sec. We've got this one isn't proving the existence of God without a doubt antithetical to the basis of Christianity, which is faith.
Well, first of all, it isn't here about me trying to prove the existence of God. And I said previously, I think that both positions, theism and atheism, and with the atheism, I mean strong atheism, which is the proposition that most likely there is no God. That proposition is based on faith, because we do not know what exists or does not exist beyond the physical universe. So whatever position that we take, it is taken on faith. So the claim that atheists do not have or hold their position based on faith, that is simply not true.
JL? Would you like to respond to that, JL?
I'm trying to put together what he was saying. Can you repeat that, Otangelo?
Yeah, I am saying that nobody knows what exists or does not exist beyond the physical universe. So the position that an atheist or a theist holds it based on belief or on faith, because an atheist doesn't know either that there is no God or that the physical universe is all there is.
Well, we can presume beyond I think what you mean by is visible universe. What we can see is that as light continues on, that we will eventually see more. It just simply the light hasn't hit us yet is what the problem is. No, we don't assume that there is anything there. We would have to be agnostic to it because there's no evidence to support it. So how could we possibly know? It doesn't serve any mechanistic explanation about the universe. So yeah, of course, we don't know. There very well could be something out there. What we're talking about, though, is the Christian triune God, because I addressed the deism argument. That deism, yeah, you could reasonably argue yourself to deism. Absolutely. The nameless, faceless entity that kicked the football on the universe, and they didn't leave any trace of its existence because it's sufficiently powerful enough to do so. Yes, you could argue to that. But the Christian triune God in and of itself, because you, Otangelo, are a Christian, so you hold to that unless all of a sudden you became a deist.
Well, I think that the first cause argument, or the kalam, leads directly and straightforward to the God of the Bible. Maybe not necessarily to a triune God, but to the God of the Bible. And that can be substantiated by the fact that Aquinas showed us that attributions of the true God are logically deduced. Properties of the first cause are supernatural in nature, uncaused, beginningless, and eternal. Omnipresent and all-knowing, changeless, timeless, immaterial, spaceless, personal, enormously powerful, necessary, absolutely independent and self-existent, infinite and singular, intelligent and purposeful. And that is precisely the description which we encounter in the Bible.
So I think this kind of helps put a point on this one here. PhD Tony says, at the plot hole, would Otangelo accept that physics does not prove Christianity is wrong, but neither does it prove Christianity to be correct? Would you say that's an agreeable statement?
I would say that physics points to theism, not necessarily to a specific religion or faith system. It points to the fact that it is a teleological argument that we can construct by positing that the universe had a beginning, therefore a cause, this cause is God. It is fine-tuned, therefore it requires a fine-tuner. There are laws of physics, therefore there has to be someone which instantiates and secures these laws and makes that the universe is stable in its entire period of existence. And I think these are powerful evidence and arguments which you can use to make a case for an intelligent creator which instantiated the universe. Now, which God, that is really something which we can leave to theism and philosophy.
So, JL, would you assume or would you agree that with PhD Tony's question that physics does neither prove nor disprove?
No, as I explained in my second point, I actually would say that, prove outright? No, I would agree with what PhD Tony said. But I think to Christianity, because Christianity makes assertions about the God that it worships, that the Christian triune God has specific attributes. And I think in my second point, I illustrated pretty well that these attributes are pretty much logically contradictory to reality as we observe it. So I think if the God is defined incorrectly by Christianity, then sure. But I don't think it gets me past deism. that point. But I think not Christianity in itself, but the Christianity's God. Yeah, I think physics pretty much knocks it down.
All right. This is a poignant question to Otangelo from PhD Tony. Says, why did you refuse to debate me twice?
Well, I asked in Discord what if you were supporting your atheism based on the fact that that upon your understanding the universe is old, and you said no. And I said, well, it would be meaningful to have a debate in regards of the age of the universe if that would substantiate your position as an atheist. Since you denied that, and I said, well, I mean, I want to have conversations and debates with people because of their reasons why they actually are atheists, and not for a topic which has nothing to do with it. And there are also old earth creationists which are Christians. So the age of the universe doesn't prove or disprove God. It's just an interpretation of reality. I'm a young earth creationist. I was for a long time agnostic in regards of that issue. I started as an old earth creationist, but during that period I was a Christian. So I think this is a relevant topic in order to either deny or substantiate the Christian God.
All right. So one of the questions
I offered him to have a debate like we are having tonight. So this offer stands, and I have no problem if it is in regards of substantiating theism or atheism. Then I'm interested.
So we are correct to assume that you are arguing for the Christian God, correct?
Yes, I'm a Christian. Yeah.
Just making sure. That was one of the questions that came up. All right. So JL, is human logic infallible? And if yes, what gives it that quality? And if no, what gives it its authority?
So if we're talking about the classical laws of logic, the law of non-contradiction, the law of identity, and the law of excluded middle, these are, as far as we can tell, inviolable descriptors of they're constant and they're universal and they're inviolable, because in all possible worlds, to make distinctions between existence, then yes, they would have to be true. Like I said earlier, they are affirmed by their negation. If we are unable to make distinctions, then we cannot make determinations between what exists and what does not exist, what is and what is not. So simply by their negation, they are affirmed, and in all possible worlds, because to say a thing in a possible world exists, or to even say another world exists, we must be able to make the distinction between this reality that we are in and this world we're in and another world. So simply, that's why I've always considered them to be one of the greatest breakthroughs in human thought, is that we looked at the universe and we looked at reality and we asked these questions. It's like, this is how the universe works. And so this is how we make determinations between me, between you, between all things. It's simply by this nature. So yeah, they are, as far as we can tell, they are universal, they are constant, and they are inviolable. Does that say that they will be a million years in the future? No, but they are now.
Otangelo, what do you think? Is human logic infallible? And if yes, what gives it that quality? If no, what gives it its authority?
Well, logic is the foundation upon which we reason. So I don't have any discord in regards of that with J.L. Warren. But the big issue actually is, where does logic come from? And I think that atheism has absolutely no explanation in regards of that question, not only logic, but also the origin of language. I've studied the topic. Science has no plausible explanation of how language actually originated, and also consciousness, that are all topics which are interrelated. And I think that matter is in substance something different than consciousness. And I don't think that atheism has a good answer to that. But we as theists, I as a dualist, I can see that God has logic. He in his nature, he is logic. He thinks logically, and he created humans as well with logic. And that is a coherent proposition. Claiming that matter can produce consciousness and logic is not.
Yeah, actually incorrect on that. So what you're referring to are abstracts. Yes, logic and language and mathematics or whatever, these are abstractions. Okay, so we thought of them. So literally, these are descriptors. These are the language we use to basically, when I write down the law of excluded middle, this is what I'm using to describe what I see. what I am observing. So I observe that A is equal to A and A is not equal to not A. So this is simply it. So the language by which we write these things down, the verbiage that we utilize is completely arbitrary. Okay, you could say bleep, blah, 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 and it could mean the exact same thing as long as it's describing the exact same thing. So the language is arbitrary, everything about it is, but the laws of logic are not, because they are descriptors of reality. What you're referring to is basically, yes, we thought them up because this is us describing the universe. But yeah, it's an abstract. It's not that something instantiated them. It's just that's what we observe. So it's not that they began to exist or something made them exist. It's essentially, you could say, we made them exist because we wrote them down because we are describing reality. The laws of logic are descriptive, not prescriptive of the universe. So yeah, they came from us. And yes, as far as we can tell, all evidence points to the fact that our consciousness, our mind, is an emergent property of our brain. So one cardiac cell cannot beat on its own, but all the cardiac cells working in tandem can make a heartbeat. But one brain cell does not have descriptive consciousness or testable consciousness of any sort, but all the brain cells working together do. And this is not just for humans. This is for outside of the Homo genus as well. Cetaceans, octopi, hell, even dogs, cats, squirrels, all have measurable degrees of consciousness. No matter how rudimentary they may be, they are aware of their surroundings. Okay, it's just how complex that consciousness becomes depends upon the complexity of the brain, how long the brain has been around, or how the brain has had the opportunity to develop. Okay, but that's natural selection. This is what enables us to do what we do. So no, yes, consciousness, the mind, as far as we can tell, as far as we can test, emergent property of the brain, destroy the brain, no more consciousness, no more mind. There's nothing to suggest that it continues on after us or that there's some outside link or whatever where it goes somewhere. Even if it did, we can't test it, we can't observe it, we can't demonstrate it. It has no predictive value, it has no explanatory value. So why would we assume it just because it makes us feel better?
Well, that would be
PSG Tony is correcting you there, JL. Octopodes, JL. Absolutely.
Oh, octopodes, sorry.
Just a clarification point there.
I said octopi, didn't I? That was octopi.
So GL Warren, go and collect your Nobel Prize, because as far as I understand, the origin of consciousness is regarded as the hard problem. It's a hard problem. It's not solved by science. You think the answer, but I think science does not. And I would like to make us propose or read here a syllogism in regards of consciousness. One, consciousness englobes the mind, qualia intellectual activity, calculating, thinking, forming abstract ideas, imagination, introspection, cognition, memories, awareness, experiencing, intentions, free volition, free creation, invention, generation of information. It classifies, recognizes, and judges behavior, good and evil. It is aware of beauty and feels sensations and emotions. 2, hard objects are never observed spontaneously to transform themselves into abstract ideas. To ascribe to the electrons in our brain the property to generate consciousness and not to ascribe the same property to the electrons moving in a bulb is in contradiction with quantum mechanics, with quantum physics, which establishes that all electrons are equal and indistinguishable. That is, they have all exactly the same properties. The mind is to the brain what the pianist is to the piano. The former, the pianist, is not reducible to the latter, the piano. 3, those are all fundamental, discrete, indivisible, non-quantifiable qualities of substance, which has a different identity from hard physical objects, matter and space. It is immaterial. Perception, understanding, and evaluation of things adds a quality beyond and absent from natural physical matter and states, and can therefore not be reduced to known physical principles. The mind cannot be emergent property of the brain. Existing fundamentals, space, time, mass, charge, can't explain consciousness, which itself is something fundamental and essentially different than physical things. Therefore, dualism is true, and since the universe at the beginning, the mind precedes and exists beyond the universe, that mind is God.
Is there a way you can make that syllogism a little less robust? Can we is there a Cliff's Notes version or a Sparks Notes version of that syllogism?
Yeah. I can give you the link. You can put it in the side chat so people can.
Well, no, I'm more concerned with the verboseness of that syllogism. It might be difficult to get a succinct and clear understanding of what you are trying to say with that syllogism.
Yeah, you can put the link to what I have collected in regards of that topic in the side chat, so people can read it again later on.
Well, you facetiously told me to go and collect my Nobel, but what I told you, what I stated about the connection between the mind and the brain, is not controversial. I assume that you have read the case of Phineas Gage.
No.
You're familiar with this?
No.
How much of a background do you have in neurophysiology, like understanding the concepts between molecular ions and how they help to activate the mind in the brain? Familiar with this?
No.
Okay, so I'll put it quite simply. I've done quite a strong amount of research into neurophysiology because the brain is very interesting. The brain is a very interesting organ, and there's a lot about it we're still figuring out because the brain is like a computer that organically wires itself as you develop and learn things. So nobody is exactly the same, but there's certain fundamental functions of the brain that do remain the same, like the effects of serotonin, the effects of dopamine, how the brain is laid out within the case and everything. So we only have to look at the case of there's other cases like it, but the case of Phineas Gage is very, very simple. Phineas Gage, and the year escapes me, was a railroad worker that had a railroad spike due to I believe it was a natural gas explosion, or maybe a steam valve explosion, had a railroad spike shoot through his head and pierce his temporal lobe. So before the accident, and when he survived, so before the accident, Phineas was a very congenial person. He was upbeat, he was optimistic, he was friendly, he was kind to everybody. Everybody liked him. But his brain was damaged through his temporal region, and it's damaged the area of I believe it damaged the hippocampus and somewhere else. But effectively, it damaged the area of his brain that dictated his personality. And when Phineas came out of the coma that he was in, when they removed the spike and he survived, Phineas was not Phineas anymore. Still Phineas Gage, still remembered who he was. But the fundamental nature of the human being altered completely, irrevocably, forever. Phineas was now angry. He was pissed off all the time. He used foul words that he'd never used before. He was irritable. He was prone to outbursts. And typically he became an all-around asshole that nobody really liked to be around. So, but everything, his memory, everything about him was pretty much intact, except for the scope of who he was. So we know that by altering the brain in very finite or very small or very large ways, we can fundamentally alter who a human being is. Literally with a slight twist in your neurophysiology, you can be made to believe that you are another gender, or that you are sexually obsessed with feet or trees. Okay? It's very, neurophysiology, there's a lot we do understand. And we do know that by tweaking the brain, changing it, or destroying it, the consciousness or the mind goes with it. Or if you limit its capacity to do what it does to activate the mind, then we can actually reduce the ability that the mind has. People lose cognitive function all the time, especially with Alzheimer's or dementia. This is where the mind begins to go, where memories begin to fragment, where the ability for the proteins that block the brain's ability to actually function normally. And we see that. We can test it. We can observe it. We can make predictive modeling with it. We can actually say, you have this stage of Alzheimer's. You most likely have, if the trend continues, you probably have 6 months or maybe up to a year. So there is predictive modeling regarding the brain. We understand degenerative function of the brain. There's over 100 years of study that's gone into this. So no, simply saying that you proved dualism, because I noticed that went to your board, the CATS board. So simply saying that you prove dualism, you should be the one collecting your Nobel, because there is no evidence to support that.
All right. If anybody's collecting a Nobel, it's going to be me. We all know this.
Oh, of course, John.
Can I please answer to that?
Take about 10, 15 seconds.
No, First of all, I've not claimed that I solved the problem. It is just what I believe, that dualism is true. But
no, you claimed it was true, flat out.
All right, let him finish. Let him finish.
I would like to quote here Marco Biagini. He wrote in astronomy.net, scientific proof of God's existence. Science has in fact proved that all chemical, biological, and cerebral processes consist only in some successions of elementary physical processes determined in their turn only by the laws of quantum mechanics. Such a view of biological processes does not allow to account for the existence of consciousness, which existence implies then the presence in man of an unphysical element. Now, in regards of your example that people changed the way they behaved, I see the mind to the brain in the similar sense as the pianist to the piano. And of course, if you damage the piano, then the pianist cannot play a melody or whatever on the piano as previously.
Okay. Let's go on to this. We have just a couple more questions, and then we can go to the next section. What is a logical contradiction inherent in an appeal to an infinite regress?
None. There is none. There literally is nothing wrong with an infinite regress. It very well could be the possibility. It's simply an infinite regress of universes, because there's nothing wrong with that. God merely caps our knowledge and says, no, this is a better answer.
Well, I disagree. It is not a problem of a logical contradiction. It is a problem that physically an eternal regress is simply not possible. And there are several reasons that we can substantiate that. But one is, I think Stephen Meyer put that nicely, illustrated it in the Return of the God hypothesis. He said, if the past is infinitely old, then getting from the past to the present would be like trying to climb to the surface of the earth from a hole infinitely deep, from a bottomless pit. As one contemporary philosopher has characterized the problem, one could get no foothold in an infinite temporal series to even get started. For to get to any point, one already has to have crossed infinity.
Yeah, but the problem is that the very first statement, the very first line that you read there is if the universe is infinitely old, which no one claims that it is.
Well, if it's
because this universe, this universe itself, no one claims it's infinitely old. We know the age of it.
Well, if it had a beginning, it had a cause, and it makes.
Well, that's if it had a beginning, which no one says that it did.
Okay, let's let him get his thought out.
No one makes these claims, Otangelo. You're saying if this. These are hypotheticals. These are hypotheticals that nobody that don't exist in physics.
Oh, you can make a thought experiment, and you cannot come to the present moment in time starting from an infinity in the past.
Sure you can. It's just a cyclical universe. It just begins again and again and again and again. All we know is that the potential for work is there. The energy is always there. The Big Bang is merely an event. We don't know what came before it, but that's okay. We're not going to assume that it's God because it makes things easier for us or assuages some fear we have about the afterlife or other questions. God merely complicates things. What we say is there's a question mark. And then eventually, like I said, like you misquoted me, we have top minds working on it. There are top minds better than we are who are investigating this stuff. And eventually we will get past it because God exists in the spaces, the ever narrowing spaces of our understanding of reality. Because remember, the more we understand about reality, we don't have to go back and re-understand it. We are adding to our collective knowledge. And the more we add to it, the less there is to learn. And eventually we will understand it. And if there does happen to be some deity being at the beginning of it, then so be it. But it's irrational to assume that there is just because you want there to be one or because it makes you feel better about the seeming lack of purpose of your life in the face of the cosmos or because you need something to give you that drive. These are appeals to emotion, like I stated in my intro.
Yeah, I think you didn't understand what I quoted from Stephen Meyer, but I can say it in other words. Imagine an event that would occur in the future. Let's say Real Madrid would win the soccer game against Barcelona at 2-0. If this game would be occurring 100 or 1,000 years from now, we would know after that finite period of time that's, that soccer game would actualize and occur. But if we imagine that it would occur at an infinite period of time from now, then that game would never actualize, because no matter how many years from now, it would always be an infinite period of time ahead. That period would never actualize. If we imagine that the soccer game mentioned above would occur right now, then this moment is the future of the past. In order to actualize, the past cannot be infinite, but must be finite. Otherwise, the soccer game would never actualize. So that states the problem again. You cannot start from an infinite period of time back to actualize that present moment in time now.
Unless, of course, the end of the previous one begets the beginning of the next one. Like some sort of, because we've never observed the universe in a state of thermal equilibrium. We never have. So we don't know that the laws of physics will even uphold at that point. So yeah, there are hypotheses that there could be some quantum event that triggers that in the event of thermal equilibrium, where the universe, where the work potential is zero, that some quantum event may occur that triggers the expansion of the next universe, or maybe the same one. Who knows? Like I said, these are hypotheses. And what you basically stated right there was just a reverse of Zenu's arrow. And I'm certain you're familiar with that, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Zenu's arrow, was it Zenu? No, but anyway, the arrow paradox. In essence,
Yeah.
an arrow when an arrow flies, it has to get from point A to point B, but it must cross an infinite number of half distances before it gets to B, but it still gets to B, is the problem.
Yeah,
So,
if you start to make mathematical equations with infinity, then you get absurd numbers. So
exactly. So we look at this. We look at what we have, and we don't make assertions about things that we can't possibly know right now. So it literally comes down to an appeal to emotion. That's something that you want to be true, which is fine. You can want that to be true, but there's no evidence to support it. There's just there's just hypotheses and probabilities that we really have no basis to say that there's odds of anything with a sample size of 1, or these grand assumptions about the nature of the universe and the nature of life in and of itself. You want life to have a purpose. You want there to be a reason that we are here. You want there to be a specific agential cause for why we're able to look up at the stars and wonder why, and no other species on this planet observably doesn't. I get that. I understand that. But it does not make your God true. It simply doesn't.
All right. Last question before we get on to a little bit more, or the next section. What was God doing before he created the universe, and why did he do so? Was she lonely?
No, I think he was listening to his heavenly orchestra of angels.
That's it. That's all we got.
Well, right. I'm actually really curious. I'm actually really curious because I kind of to piggyback off of that. So the Earth is like the Earth is 4.3. Was it 4.35 billion years old? And human beings have only occupied the last quarter. Homo sapiens have only occupied the last 250,000 years. So why create a 4.35 billion? Why create this 4 billion year old planet and only have life capable in like the last 3 billion of it, complex life, only the last 500 million years, and then waste 165 million years on the dinosaurs to have human being. And then someone said, you know what? I got it. Humans this time. 250,000 years we have like that. Just as the cosmologically speaking, just as the window of survivability on this planet is beginning to close. Why? Maybe you can answer that because if we're a result of natural processes, this is fine. That we understand this, but why would a God do this if we are this important?
I really like that, and I think we are on the same page, G.L. Warren. And I think it is a completely nonsensical proposition to think that God would create the Earth 4.5 billion years ago, and then wait over 3 billion years to start actually with the Cambrian explosion to make biodiversity and complex organisms. So That's why I think young Earth creationism is much more reasonable.
So why would God create
500 years ago?
Yeah, so why would God create an Earth 6,000 years ago and make it look like it was 4.35 billion?
Oh, I will ask him when I'm in heaven. I don't know.
Aha. Okay.
All right. Let's see. I'm just scanning the chat really quick. I think we're good. So we're going to take this time now, JL, if you would like to take 5 minutes for your closing statements.
Absolutely.
1 sec. Let me get you full screen there. Boom.
That's too much me.
Whenever you are ready, you may begin.
Thank you. Well, while we cannot make a final determination on whether or not any God exists, as the conversation ultimately comes down to what the person wants to believe, it is important to make the distinction between which is more important, what you want to be true or what actually is true. Now, I know that of the two positions, the atheist position, and I believe I've demonstrated the atheist position is the more intellectually honest one to hold. In regards to the Christian triune God, given the dearth of evidence, a universe we observe that contradicts the very asserted nature of the God, the logical contradictions implied by its own existence, the lack of explanatory power of such a being, violations of the fundamental laws of reality, special pleading, magical thinking, begging the question, and it must be said, the sheer narcissistic arrogance it takes to believe that oneself is the center of the universe. It has been established that this belief in a being that most assuredly possesses the qualia of non-existence is wholly justified. And while this certainly does not defeat any deist position, I believe it is quite clear that the points I defined earlier are indeed the stone that the Christian triune God cannot lift. And yes, while absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, it does hold the same logical value as non-existence until such a being deigns to reveal itself. Until that day occurs, though, humanity must let go of what they want, hope, or desire to be true and embrace what factually is. Thank you.
All righty. And now, Otangelo, you have 5 minutes when you are ready.
Yes, contrary to what J.L. Warren said, that the theistic position is based on lack of knowledge or gaps on understanding, I think that it is solidly based on positive evidence, which disproves the claim and accusation that our position is based on gaps of knowledge. And I want to list here 21 reasons why I think that theism is positively evidenced. Following is a list of positive evidence of God's existence, not depending on gaps or lack of knowledge. 1, existence of the universe. The universe had a beginning, therefore a cause. 2, the universe obeys laws and rules of mathematics and physics. Its implementation depends on the action of an intelligent, rational agency. 3, the physical universe and the laws of physics are interdependent and irreducible. There would not be one without the other. 4, fine-tuning. The fundamental physical constants, the universe and the earth, are finely tuned for life. Over 140 constants must be just right. 5, formation of life. Life comes only from life. Abiogenesis has never been demonstrated to be possible despite over half a century of intensive scientific research. 6, cells are literally factories. Biological cells are an industrial park of millions of interconnected complex factories, full of machines, and factories are always designed. 7, a minimal free-living cell requires at least 1,300 proteins with an average size of about 400 amino acids. That requires to select one out of 10 to the 722,000 power of attempts to get the right proteome. 8, irreducible complexity. Biological cells require a minimal number of parts which have no use by themselves and would never accumulate on a prebiotic Earth. 9, the appearance of design. The universe and biological systems appear designed. Therefore, most probably, they are designed. 10, codified information. DNA has the highest storage density known and stores the blueprint of life. Blueprints can always be traced back to intelligence. 11, the fossil record. The fossil record, and in special the Cambrian explosion, demonstrates the sudden appearance of life forms without intermediates. 12. Consciousness and language. Conscience, mental reality, language, logic, free will, moral values are immaterial entities and cannot emerge from physical matter. 13. Objective moral values exist. They are ought to be's imprinted in our conscience. 14. Human objective logic depends and can only derive from a pre-existing necessary first mind with objective logic. 15. Theology and philosophy. Both lead to an eternal, self-existent, omnipresent, transcendent, conscious, intelligent, personal, and moral creator. 16. The Bible. The Old Testament is a catalogue of fulfilled prophecies of Jesus Christ and his mission, death, and resurrection foretold with specificity. 17. Archaeology demonstrates that all events described in the Bible are historical facts. 18. History. Historical evidence reveals that Jesus Christ really did come to this earth and really did physically rise from the dead. 19. The Bible's witnesses. There are many testimonies of Jesus doing miracles even still today, and Jesus appearing to people all over the globe still today. 20. End times. The signs of the end times that were foretold in the Bible are occurring in front of our eyes. New World Order, Israel as a nation, microchip implant, etc. 21. Afterlife experiences. Credible witnesses have seen the afterlife and have come back and reported to us that the afterlife is real. So this is my closing remark.
All right. Let's get JL back in here. We'll take you off full screen. Awesome. There we are. I got to say, Otangelo, I didn't think you were going to be able to get 21 points in there in 5 minutes, but you managed to do it with 30 seconds to spare. So I applaud you on that. Personally, I would like to thank both of the interlocutors for showing today. Otangelo, it took immense courage to stand up to the bully that is Darth Dawkins to show up to this debate, and I appreciate you holding to your convictions and keeping your word. That means a lot to me. I know it may not mean so much me saying that to you, but again, I wanted to thank you for showing. I do appreciate it. Now let's get on to the old super chats to make sure I did not miss any of the questions. I think I got them all, especially ones that came through via super chat, but just in case, we'll see what we got going on here. All right, let me get this going. All right, so Raw Parks, I said that one earlier, I read that one earlier, probably won't make it through the entire thing, but here is my tie to the Church of Johnny. Thank you very much. Irish Demon for 449 Aussie says, super chats make the earth more spherical. Rob Parks for 5 US. Otangelo isn't proving the existence of God without doubt antithetical to the basis of Christianity, which is faith. I did get that one there. The Logical Hillbilly for 5 says, I'm not going to assume Otangelo's religion, so which God is he actually arguing for? I believe I got that one as well. Rob Parks for another 5. JL, is human logic infallible? And if yes, what gives it that quality? And if no, then what gives it its authority? We got that one as well.
Mm-hmm.
Facty,
I have a real quick question. Otangelo, can I ask you real fast? You're not a flat earther, are you? I'm just throwing it out there. I'm just curious because the reason I ask is because I've engaged with a lot of biblical flat earthers that take the Bible directly literally, whichever version they're reading, and they'll quote like from Acts, Judges, 1 Timothy, the particular cherry picked lines that they say support their flat earth notion or the proposition that the earth is flat. But I never heard you bring it up. I don't think you are you? Okay, yeah, I didn't think that you were, so that's fine. I'm kind of curious because I know you're a young Earth creationist, so you'll accept the science that the Earth is spherical, because that's pretty much we can demonstrate it. But the same goes for the age of the Earth, and I'm just kind of curious that it's a strange break into epistemology.
That's a topic.
It's a conversation for another time, but I was just curious. It was for my own edification. That was all. So just to throw it out there. But continue on, Johnny.
All right, so Facty for 2.
Let me answer to that. I am sure that if I search a little bit, I will also find flat earthers which are who are atheists. So
I've never met one. I've literally, for years I've been involved in this. I've never met an atheist flat earther. I don't.
I
would
mean,
literally.
even if there are flat earthers, I think they are not representative for Christianity or.
So no true Christian would believe that.
Oh, I've not said that. What I am saying is that the number is not representative for Christianity and creationists in
Well,
general.
in
So
essence,
it's what we're saying is that it's a small
minority.
subset of Christianity, one that you think is immaterial or at least not worth addressing.
Not true Christian. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right. So Factive for 279 Canadian says, Otangelo, tell Dorothy is wrong about this channel. Danny for 2 says, can you ask my question, please? Danny, tag me. I think I did ask your question just to be on the safe side. His Shadow for 699 Canadian says, will Otangelo admit to quote mining scientific articles for improbable numbers when said articles contain admonishments that such use is dishonest?
Well, no, I disagree. It's not dishonest. That's the evidence, and we are justified to rationalize what that leads to. And I mean, if the author thinks it doesn't justify to infer creationism or an intelligent designer, well, that is also a philosophical view, which I don't think is necessarily authoritative. So I reject that completely. I think what is relevant when I cite a scientific paper which brings up the numbers, that's the evidence which is relevant. What the author thinks in regards of the inference, that is a personal position which I respect, but it isn't authoritative in no way. So
yeah, but what they're talking about is
irrelevant to me.
But what they're talking about, the individual who asked that, they're familiar with the articles that you're citing. And what they're saying is that you've cherry picked the quotes out of it, but if you actually take the entire article in context and you come to the conclusion is completely antithetical to what you're asserting. That basically you took a section.
I just responded to that. The evidence is what is relevant, and that is indisputable.
The evidence doesn't lead to. But you're drawing a different conclusion from what the author did.
I'm entitled to do that. I'm entitled to do that.
But
hang on, JL. Let him answer. Let him answer your question.
The inference is a philosophical one, which I am perfectly entitled to make a different inference. And I mean, what is relevant is that we look at the evidence, at the data, and then we can discuss it. That should be what science is about. So I don't see anything dishonest in regards of. I mean, if we look in regards of the entire body of biology and biochemistry, I mean, since in design cannot be inferred right from the beginning, it is excluded a priori. So whatever design inference that I make, it will always be contrary to what the author states, because he has to come to a naturalistic explanation because of the scientific framework.
So you see nothing dishonest about literally taking the body of somebody's work and then selecting a section of it, taking it out of that, which removes it from context, removes it from what came before it, from the setup of what he was talking about to the conclusion of the article that you pulled it from, and taking that out, quoting the person out of context and coming to a presupposed conclusion that you want to back up. Basically, taking the section that you've cherry picked and then reforming it to fit your own argument. You see nothing inherently dishonest with that.
It's not a presupposed thing. It is an inference to the best explanation based on the data. So there is absolutely nothing dishonest in doing so. As I said previously, the data is the evidence. If I would change the data and change it in order to make a case for what I believe, then yes, then it would be dishonest. But if I take the data, which is undisputed, and then give my inference to the best explanation, this is the philosophical circle around the evidence and the science, then there is absolutely nothing dishonest about it.
No, because you're misappropriating the evidence that you're citing. The section that you're pulling out, you are misappropriating it for another argument. So yes, you've taken someone else's work and you've taken it out of context, which the conclusion they come to is wildly different from yours. In fact, it's contradictory. And then you take the bulk of that in order to, and I'm going to posit that you've done this in order to basically say that this atheist who came up with this conclusion, this atheist physicist, actually use argumentation that actually supports your God, trying to basically deface his work and use it for your own ends. But you would only do that. You would only choose the argumentation from a physicist, from an atheist physicist, because you believe in a God. That's why you believe in a God. You found that, and then you use this. You say, I can use this to support my argument, while completely ignoring the context of that article and the conclusion that the original person came to. That's literally like pulling a section, like that's close to plagiarism, and just saying, I came up with this and I'm using it for my own ends.
Well, I disagree. Again, I disagree completely. It has nothing to do with the context, and I challenge you. Bring up the paper, and I can even cite you which one it was. It was in regards of information in DNA, and the odds in order to have a strand of about 100 amino acids, what the odds would be to get that amino acid strand, that specific sequence by natural means, and then we can see if what I am doing is dishonest or not. I stand to challenge J.L. Warren. You can even make another stream, and they will be more than happy. And I've done that in the other channel. I said to the owner of the channel, let's do a stream just to clarify that, and we've done that. And I stand up again to the same challenge, and I'll be more than happy to do it again. We can do it even at this channel here, no problem with me.
Well, I mean, we can set that up for a later date. Absolutely. I think the question is using somebody else's work outside of the context of their conclusions in order to draw different conclusions without demonstrating how their conclusions are incorrect. I think ultimately that is where people are having the biggest.
No, that is part of the argument to demonstrate why the design inference is a better inference based on the evidence rather than naturalistic explanations.
I think as long as you hold yourself to that, to actually showing how the evidence that you are pulling out of context.
Nothing is drawn out of context. What we have is the scientific evidence, the data, and then we.
Well, no, I'm sorry, but taking a different person's work out of context. I mean, if we were not allowed to do that, then the entire conversation, which science should be about, in regards of making an interpretation of reality, that then would be forbidden, because we would I'm not saying that.
We would be obligated to hold to the interpretation of the author of a scientific paper or of a body of knowledge, and that, of course, is completely of rational.
Oh, no, absolutely. I would agree with you there. That's the reason why I'm making the distinction that I'm making. So long as you're using the evidence and demonstrating how the author of the conclusions, how your explanation works better or defines more or has more predictive capability, etc. I think that's important. So his shadow for another $6.99 Canadian says, on a scale of 1 to 11, how annoying is Otangelo's dependence on quoting others' work, much of it out of context? That seems to be a
42.
That seems to be a common thing coming up. That there's a lot of people that question your use of evidence or quotes out of context. I think that's something.
Well, if they think that I'm quoting out of context, they should be able to show how what I quote is out of context.
Well, these are people who are familiar with the articles that you're citing. Now, I myself did not familiarize with this because this was not supposed to be a physics debate, because physics does not prove God. And sorry, this is the way it is. But
it is not about proving things, J.L. Warren. That's what I said in my introduction, or responding to your introduction, where I said that nobody has proofs either side in regards of if God exists or not, because we cannot look beyond the physical universe. So all we can do is making inference to the best explanation based on the evidence which we have at hand, which is the physical universe.
Well, that's true, but I can knock down the Christian triune God, which is what I knocked down because of the attributes of the being itself. It gets you to deism. I'll grant you that. It gets you to deism, but it does not get you to the Christian triune God, which violates all manner of reality just by virtue of how you and other Christians define it. Okay, but the problem
I've never claimed that the teleological argument leads to the triune God. I've never claimed that. But
I have heard you. I have heard you in debate, and I've heard you on Discord.
Hang on, Jail. Hang on.
No,
Jail.
but I've heard you in debate.
He's responding. He's responding to your initial. Let him finish responding, and then you can rebut.
So again, what I believe is that the Kalam cosmological argument leads to the God of the Bible. It doesn't substantiate the Trinity. I agree with you on that. But I think that the teleological argument leads to an intelligent designer. It doesn't necessarily lead to a specific deity.
But you're a Christian.
Yes,
the Christian triune God. The Christian triune God is the God of your religion.
Yes.
So it doesn't behoove us to talk about deism when you don't believe in deism, but to talk about the Christian triune God when that is the focus of your religion.
Well, it makes no sense to have a debate with you in regards of my specific God if you hold the position that there is no God whatsoever. So I think it makes sense in the first step of a dialogue to talk about if either there is a God or not. And if eventually after that conversation you come to the conclusion that theism is a better inference rather than atheism or naturalism to explain our reality, then we can eventually go a step further and use a cumulative argument to the Christian God.
But you're a Christian. Why wouldn't you represent Christianity?
Well, I mean, most of my interlocutors, I don't know if you have a Christian background, but
I do.
If I start... Yes, so you know the arguments of the Bible. Why should I start with John 3:16, why Christ died on the cross for our sins? I mean, you know this.
Yeah, I wouldn't go to the Bible either, simply because, even if I was a Christian, because the Bible is the claim, not the evidence. So, and we can debunk the Bible all day long.
So my approach, J.L. Warren, is to elucidate the first question in that exchange, that debate. Is there a God or rather not? Once this has been elucidated, and eventually my opposite side comes to the conclusion that yes, after the evidence has been provided and the arguments have been made, that a God is the better explanation which explains reality, then yes, I am open to defend my Christian faith, no problem, and I've done it many times.
All right. Road No Last Name for 5 says, Otangelo, what evidence would change your mind on the existence of God? JL, opposite question.
Yeah, since I am a Christian, if the bones of Jesus would be found, then I would, of course, I could not continue to substantiate my Christian faith. And if you talk about the physical universe, an atheist would have to be able to provide a better alternative mechanism which explains the complexity of the physical world, a mechanism that would be more powerful and capable than an intelligence, which I am not aware of.
All right, JL.
I have no idea, because questions would follow. So I can honestly say, because even if there was a being, then that asks more questions. Is the being worthy of worship? Is the being unique to us? Whatever, and so on and so forth. It just more questions abound. So read the question again one more time. I'll just make sure I'm answering it.
Let's see. What evidence would change your mind on the existence of God, or the lack of existence?
Oh, well,
what would make you believe that God exists?
What would make me believe that God exists? Honestly, I have no idea. But if such a being exists, then such a being knows and is choosing not to give it to me.
All right. Inquisitor Bacon for 5 USD says, Otangelo, why does your Jesus appear miraculously to someone on a sandwich, but not to a child who is abused and begging for help? I think that's a bit of a loaded question. You don't have to answer that if you don't want. I'll leave that up to you.
Well, I don't think that he appears on the sandwich. He appeared on the Shroud of Turin. That's enough for me.
All right.
Sorry. Oh, cough. Sorry, I gotta get something to drink.
Stop it. Skydiver Tanner for 5 USD says, Otangelo, how did God come about? What's their beginning?
He's eternal. He had no beginning. He just is.
Isn't that circular?
Well,
That's
that's the
viciously circular
foundation.
because it special pleads him out of the first premise.
Yeah, it's a justified special pleading because God is not like us; He is above us. So there is no further explanation of God. He simply
It
is.
doesn't work that
That's
way.
the that's
Just,
the ultimate. There
no, it
is no
doesn't. It
further
doesn't.
explanation.
Just because you define it a particular way does not make the reasoning valid. Just because
Well,
you're
I mean,
talking about a God doesn't make the circular reasoning less circular or less conclusion informing the first premise. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry.
I can defend the eternity of God. Obviously, since we exist, something must have been always without the beginning. Otherwise, something would pop up out of nothing, and that is, ontologically speaking, not possible.
Unless it was always energy.
Yeah,
always.
But that I don't believe this is possible.
Well, you'd be incorrect. Violation of the first law of thermodynamics. Sorry, but you're still begging the question. It's still your conclusion informing your first premise. It's still viciously circular. And just because you're talking about a God doesn't make it. Leave that Darth Dawkins argumentation behind you, dude. Because just because you're talking about a God or just because you defined a God in a particular way doesn't make the argumentation any less begging the question.
Well, if you hold to me the first law, then I will hold to you the second law. And since the second law has never been broken, we would already be in a state of heat death and not have this conversation together.
It's okay, that was an assertion with no evidence, but feel free, Johnny, continue.
John Rapp says, my question is to both. Why is it so attractive to believe in a creator as opposed to a natural development of life? Is it not just a mindset?
Well, the problem of natural mechanisms is that they are too unspecific. We need a very specific set of molecules to start life, which are 4 categories, and they would have to be selected. There was no selection mechanism prebiotically. That is a big problem for abiogenesis research and hypotheses.
I'm assuming you're up to date on the advancements in organic chemistry as of 2021?
Yeah,
Otangelo? Because Professor Dave, who runs another YouTube channel, lovely guy, love his work, actually is an organic chemist and keeps up on this. In fact,
I would love to have a conversation with him. I don't know why he doesn't accept.
Because he doesn't argue facts. He doesn't argue things that are demonstrable facts about reality. And the reality is abiogenesis is pretty much a solved science. We don't know specific. We know all of the hypotheses of how it could have happened on this planet. We just don't know which one in particular. But we're getting there. As we knock them down, we understand them. I'm just letting you know that you need to do a little bit more work on this. We understand that this. I'm literally quoting him from the video he did on this because I'm not an evolutionary biologist. Never had any interest in me because better minds do this. But the reality is. Where we are right now, we understand abiogenesis. We understand the formation of things. We've done it in the lab.
Ooh.
Okay, wow. So we understand these things. There's documentation there. Professor Dave, just to cite his channel, he has all the articles that you're not reading. So feel free to go and check it out.
Okay, first of all, bring me the best chemist or scientist that you know. It can be Jack Szostak or whoever you want from the field. I'll be more than happy to have a conversation with these folks. Bring me Professor Dave. I think he is a joke because in his video, he stated there were polymerization machines. I mean, sorry, but the polymerization machine wasn't extant on the prebiotic Earth. So he doesn't have any degree whatsoever in the field. And he thinks that he can challenge Dr. James Tour. To me, I'm sorry, he's a joke.
That's on you.
So. There is one thing that has popped up repeatedly in the chat. You cite the second law of thermodynamics a few times. Otangelo, can you define in your words, in your own words, what the second law of thermodynamics is?
Yeah, it is a very high order of state of affairs at the beginning of the universe, and that then leads to a higher disorder towards a heat death at the end of the career of the universe, let's say.
Okay, all right. I don't see anything glaringly incorrect with that. I'm pretty sure that the side chat will let me know if they disagree with me or you. All right. Well, again, I think that's it. I think that's where we're at. We have concluded this debate. I hope everybody had an awesome time. I do appreciate once again, both interlocutors for agreeing to have this debate. Otangelo, thank you for showing up. JL, thank you for being here as well. And again, these debates are meant to be more conversational, more informative, and less combative. I don't like having a too terribly combative discussion here. So I appreciate both of you for remaining calm, cool, and collected and respectful to each other, even though there was a little bit of ribbing back and forth here and there, which I think is awesome. Anyway, that's it. I think we're done. I think we're good. Anybody else have anything they want to say? All the links for the debaters will be in the description. Should already be in the description box below. So if you want to check out Otangelo and where he's from, all of his links are in the description, as well as JL Warren and the Week in Horror podcast that JL Warren is working on as well. And of course, if you like what you see here, be sure to subscribe to the channel, as I tend to bring as many of these as I can. I would like to get some more. I just started a conversation with Leo. Hopefully we can get him on and have
Leophilus.
Yes.
I'm like so intimidated. I really am. Leophilus is in the chat. I saw that and I was like, run away.
So yes, we have one more coming up scheduled in 10 days between Rob Parks and Crafty Keela on that ever so we'll just say that easily agreeable topic of abortion.
27 away.
I didn't want to say that word either.
Can I ask you a favor?
Yes.
I put 2 links here in the private chat. If you could put at least the first abiogenesis is mathematically possible in the chat, so everyone can access the information. Since JL Warren is so sure about abiogenesis, so
abiogenesis is mathematically impossible.
I
don't think you understand what abiogenesis is.
Well, look up.
No, I know what the cat sport is. I've been to it, and no, I'm sorry. That's a conversation for another time.
Cat sport is my private library.
I'm aware of what it is. I'm aware of what it is.
All right. Well, you two just stop it. You're good. All right. Again, thanks everybody for showing up. I appreciate all the super chats, all the support. I'm sorry, PhD Tony. He has been adamant about getting this. Wants an explanation as to why you agreed to debate the age of the Earth if instead what you wanted was to debate his beliefs.
Yes, that was an error to have accepted to have this debate, but I thought that it was actually about he substantiating his atheism when I did see that it wasn't about that, so I declined.
All right,
but I agree actually that there are problems with the young Earth model, like the starlight problem. So I acknowledge this. There are open questions which are not, in my understanding, well explained.
All right, fair enough. Jack Burton says, "Hey JL, I got locked out of Discord."
Oh no, Jack Burton, no. We're gonna figure that out when we get done here.
All right, everybody, it is time. I'm getting rid of JL first, Otangelo second. You guys can go back in the green room and hang out and have a little whatevers. Thanks once again for showing up, sharing, liking, subscribing, all that fun stuff. Again, if you would like to have a debate with anybody, any topic, whatever, as long as it's not what you can't, what we can and can't talk about. Shoot me an email, theplothole1@gmail.com. We'll see what we can do to set that up, and I will provide you a well-moderated forum where everyone will get the opportunity to speak their mind and get their points across. Thank you so much for showing up. It is time to get out of here. I'm Johnny O. This is The Plot Hole. You know what's up. Finger guns, baby.